Does excessive protein cause kidney damage? And how does it affect your blood sugars? How much protein does a diabetic need per day? Today, we will expose more deceit, the misunderstandings doctors and nutritionists are still taught to this very day when it comes to protein. You will need to know the story and the initial contrived study behind all of the fear-mongering when it comes to this critical macronutrient. Protein, as you will come to find out, may be the single most important nutrient a diabetic can consume for the greatest possible health outcome. But before we begin, let me welcome all of you resilient diabetics out there. This is the channel we turn ordinary, struggling diabetics into, you know it already, extraordinary, well-controlled diabetics. If you don't know who I am and you are brand new to this channel, I welcome you. My name is Jay Sampat, and I became an insulin-dependent diabetic a little over 6 years ago due to an autoimmune attack which caused the destruction of my pancreas as a result of a severe gluten allergy attack. So basically, I am the proud owner of a pancreas that's gone on a permanent and lifelong vacation. So not only am I diabetic, just like you, where we will be walking that walk and talking that talk together, but I do also have a University Bachelor of Science degree in nutrition dietetics, and that does come in very handy in discussing all the intricacies of being a diabetic. The unique information presented today will only be found here on The Resilient Diabetic. New, life-changing episodes are generally released weekly. So if you want to learn more and you want to be notified by YouTube that a new video has been published, then the only way to do that is to first hit the subscribe button, followed by the gray notification bell, and then choose turn on all notifications. And of course, if you liked what you've learned today, please smash that like button for me. As with all of my videos, this should not be considered personal medical advice. This is my interpretation of the latest research. If you want medical advice, please always consult your doctor. Once you have viewed and understood the premise of this entire video, I will provide you with the links to all of the important studies along with the main video you will want to share with your doctor. As I mentioned in my opening monologue, I majored in nutrition dietetics. One of the major battles I faced with my professors was over the required consumption of protein, especially for the non-aerobic strength athletes. I felt even then the recommended amounts were set far too low, but my field of study was especially pro-carbohydrate, very anti-fats, and extremely conservative when it came to protein intake. So the debate continued all the way through my university days. This subject on protein intakes runs very close to my heart. And now that I'm a diabetic, protein consumption has become even more paramount to my health and yours, as a matter of fact, as you will find out. Many endocrinologists, doctors, and even most nutritionists are averse to diabetics and high protein intake due to their education and training. All thanks to a man by the name of David Brenner. Brenner basically proposed that the habitual consumption of excessive dietary protein negatively impacted kidney function. He basically turned the world upside down with just one flawed study that went viral. All of this was told thanks to Dr. Bernstein, who was there and part of these presentations. I will create that very first incredibly important link to this entire mind-blowing video in the description box below. In 1984 or so, David Brenner, who happened to be a researcher from Harvard, worked exclusively with diabetic rats. In one of his studies, he put half of his rats on a high-protein diet and the other half on ordinary high-carbohydrate rat chow, but then maintained and kept all the diabetic rat blood sugars at very high amounts throughout the entire study. Both group of rats did develop kidney disease, but the ones on the high protein diet actually died earlier. He was then highly funded to present this information and tour all over the country giving his results, especially at med schools. If you've watched my episode on diabetic snacks, then you already know some of the scathing realities and the mysterious proponents pushing the established nutritional agendas and why. These corrupt and manipulated agendas were to promote and push one thing: the excessive consumption of carbohydrates. And this was at the expense of both fats and, now you know, the other enemy, protein. So not only was his tour funded and paid for, but Harvard also issued major press releases on his study. This then resulted in his findings to be published in all the newspapers too. His study completely changed the landscape when it came to protein consumption and leveraged the consumption of carbohydrates even further. So, what was wrong with his initial study? His study was done at a time where doctors were taught, and they liked to keep their diabetic patients at, get this, 250 milligrams a deciliter. So that is where he kept his blood sugars for his rats, at 250 milligrams a deciliter. Brenner later knew and acknowledged his mistakes of keeping his rat blood sugars high in the first experiment, and then redid another study, but this time kept his rats completely normal with their blood sugars. Again, one group on the high carbohydrate rat chow and the other half on a very high protein diet. This time, found both groups with the low and controlled blood sugars lived completely normal lives. But the damage from the initial study was done. It made its way into all of the books, the textbooks, the tutorials for med schools, and more, like my university nutritional program. This new study did not get any press releases from Harvard, nor was there any funding at all to re-lecture all over the country and re-correct those facts. His initial study of those rats at 250 milligrams a deciliter damned diabetics for good, because this is what they still teach in medical schools. In my video on blood pressure and diabetes, we discussed the link between both diseases. The common link between both was hyperinsulinemia, or high circulating insulin levels due to the overconsumption of carbohydrates. The excessive sugars, once one becomes pre-diabetic and then diabetic, would then literally start tearing apart the kidneys. Remember, the kidneys try to dump out as much of the excessive sugars into the urine as a last line of defense to save the body from all the toxic amounts of excessive sugar floating around. But again, at the expense of the kidneys. Once you add in the high blood pressure along with the high blood sugars, you are looking at end-stage renal disease. Let me ask you this one simple question that will put the first nail into the coffin when it comes to this debate. How many dialysis centers did you see in your town 20 or 30 years ago? I'm betting none. Now we have 3 to 8 centers in every major city, even at most shopping malls. And I want you to think about this. Has the explosion of new dialysis centers popped up because we've been eating excessive amounts of protein? No. What have we been eating? Excessive amounts of carbohydrates. I want you to see how one study can be contrived to push a certain agenda. This is how the extreme, in vogue diets, the ones that eliminate major macronutrients, are perpetuated. Think about what I just said. Even the smartest and the brightest are sometimes blinded. This is how you are manipulated by the studies, especially when you're not aware of, first of all, who pays for the study. 2, how flawed the study was. And finally, how they spun both the data and the outcome. We now know it's the sugars and the high carbohydrate diet that is the main cause of kidney disease. Protein was again given the blame. Just like cholesterol and saturated fats were and are to be blamed for heart disease. Any and everything is used by our bought off and paid off institutions to push the high carbohydrate narrative. Athletes, particularly in sports requiring strength and power, including myself, we consume high amounts of dietary protein. In fact, many athletes habitually consume protein in excess of 2 grams per kilogram per day. Yet, there is no evidence that this population is at greater risk for kidney disease or losses in renal function. The meta-analysis I will add in the description box below found no data in the scientific literature to link high protein intakes to increased risk for impaired kidney function in healthy, physically active men or women. This widely held controversial myth that high protein diets may cause kidney damage in healthy adults was also debunked by scientists at MacArthur University, who examined more than 24 studies involving hundreds of participants. Health experts now routinely advocate the benefits of protein for many reasons. It boosts metabolism, it increases satiety, makes one feel fuller and longer, promotes fat loss, helps build muscle during weight training, and helps preserve muscle, particularly in the elderly. A diet high in protein-rich foods combined with weight training increases muscle mass and strength. This is especially important as one ages and naturally starts to lose muscle mass. Having more muscle is associated with both greater bone density and greater blood sugar control. And now for the billion-dollar question. As a diabetic, could more protein in your diet aid in both glucose control and better health? You'd better believe it. Even the great Dr. Bernstein, who goes against the grain on the medical establishment's accepted notions about diabetics and protein, he states, will become the single most important part of your diet if you are going to control your blood sugars. And I agree wholeheartedly. Our separate paths have come to the same conclusion. How much protein would a diabetic require? Dr. Bernstein suggests a non-active go with around 1.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. And like me, if you're physically active, you want to go up from there. The more exercise one does, the more intense the exercise it becomes, the more protein you are going to require. And for many of you long-standing diabetics out there who have been frustrated with the care you've received over the years, you've probably been conditioned to think that protein is more of a poison than sugar and is the cause of kidney disease. Now you know the truth. But let's also understand, if one is still consuming a high carbohydrate design intake and also have kidney damage, then yes, just like the rats, you will suffer consequences not because of the protein per se, but because of the combination of both. I always thought that most kidney damage beyond a certain point was final and unrecoverable. But from what I am seeing and reading now, if one lowers and keeps blood sugars within an A1C of around 5 and below, then those kidneys that have been badly damaged have a chance of self-healing. Now that is with the exception of those with end-stage renal kidney disease or about to be put on dialysis. So in defense of your doctors, they are also right to a degree, because remember, they are taught, and furthermore, they are mandated to keep your A1Cs high just like those rats, which means floating blood sugars will put a heavy strain on the kidneys, which will continually keep tearing them apart over time. But once one lowers sugar and carbohydrate intake by consuming the right kinds of carbohydrates, such as above ground cruciferous vegetables, and I'll say that again, above ground cruciferous vegetables, along with a lean source of protein, will there be complete control of blood sugars. But more importantly, the kidneys can stay strong and resilient. How do I personally know this? By walking the walk and talking the talk. When I was first diagnosed, my kidneys were also badly stressed and they were injured. And this occurred during a relatively short time frame where my autoimmune attack came on hard and strong against my own pancreas. The lab work that was done on the day I was diagnosed as a diabetic was atrocious. But I had one major advantage, my nutritional degree. So I immediately knew what to do, which was to drop my carbohydrate intake way down, and at the same time, without hesitation, I increased my protein intake. But because I was misdiagnosed as a type 2 diabetic and put on all the wrong medications, initially my blood sugars still remained relatively high. Thus, my kidneys were still in peril and remained stressed, which was shown by future lab work. I still knew something was not right with my treatment, so I aggressively requested additional tests. It was then on a future date where I was put on insulin and retyped as a type 1.5 insulin-dependent diabetic. Remember, I completely lost my pancreatic functioning, so my body was not producing any insulin at all. Once I was put on the right insulins and I was able to get my blood sugars precisely controlled was when my kidney lab tests then showed absolute normalcy. They were perfect test scores. And again, this was in spite of a very high protein intake. Another nail in the coffin, if you ask me, on the high carbohydrate model. Now, for those of you like me who are insulin dependent, a word of caution. Certain insulins are designed to be more powerful than others because they are the ones prescribed to be used for your typical high starch, highly dense carbohydrate based meals and continuous snacks. They do not work for a diet high in protein along with low carbohydrate, non-starchy based vegetable diets. So if you are on the industrial strength insulins, like the fast-acting insulin's Humalog or any of its comparables, and or Lantus, which is one of the most powerful of the basal insulins, then you are looking at some severe mistimings along with vicious lows and highs. Using those insulins is like trying to put a small nail into the wall for a picture frame with a jackhammer. It's the wrong tool for the wrong job. I found a diet with the right nutrient-dense vegetables, which again are the vegetables that are low in carbohydrates but extremely packed with vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, will provide just enough glucose to completely satisfy the body. Combined with a solid, good serving of protein like lean ground beef or the leaner cuts of beef, chicken breast, fish, lean ground turkey, eggs, which are my staple, then you are just not going to be hungry or crave or obsess for more and more carbohydrate-based foods every 2 to 3 hours. Thus, the best part, you will require and need even less insulin. What is more, protein can and will provide additional glucose through a process what's known as gluconeogenesis. This is where the body can take the amino acids, and these are your building blocks of protein, to produce glucose. And if you are an insulin-dependent diabetic like myself, you will need insulin to cover your protein intake too. And for many of you, this is where your doctor would have to advise and become involved. You would now need very, very small doses of regular insulin and possibly NPH, as they are better designed at smaller doses to be very gentle and easy on the body. Thus, no lows or highs, just a smooth, controlled blood glucose line all day long. But a second word of caution. Doctors and nutritionists are not trained for the low carbohydrate based diets, especially your endocrinologists. They specifically and for the most part will prescribe the industrial strength insulins that cater to their high carbohydrate model, just like the rat chow. So unfortunately, many of you will run into an immovable brick wall. And this will be the single biggest challenge for you, finding a doctor who knows and understands how to treat a diabetic patient with the best care in mind with that low carbohydrate model. One that can keep your A1Cs in that non-diabetic range and well controlled at all times. And unfortunately, it's harder said than done. Each of my videos builds a base of knowledge upon the next. So if you're new, I will also set up a playlist for you with a multitude of videos that cover the foods and carbs I do recommend and why. The carbs, that have my A1C in the low fives, but just importantly, have me using the least amounts of insulin so my blood sugars remain flatlined and well controlled all day long. Then that keeps this old diabetic feeling strong, energetic, and vibrant all day long. If you're on your desktop or laptop, I want you to use that mouse to click that upcoming box. If you're on your mobile device, just tap that with your fingers. The first is the link to subscribe to this all-important, life-changing channel. The second is the link to the playlist I will create for you on the video on foods. So, have a great and productive day, and we will see you soon with another new episode, which I said are always released weekly. Bye for now.